All right, Shawna, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I am so excited to talk to you. Like I was telling you before we hit record, a few months ago, I came across a post that you wrote for the Empire Flippers guys, and the post is called "7 Tips for Building and Flipping Sites from a Six-Figure Team of One," and that title just had so many things that made me so curious that I read the article and I was like, Shawna, I have to have you on the podcast and talk with you because you've been building and acquiring and flipping sites for several years now. So I
Mhm.
definitely want to dive in and let people hear a little bit about how you do this. How have you been building sites like this for a while? But before we get started with that, I'm curious how exactly you ended up doing this, because as far as I know, you used to work as a financial analyst, correct? So how did you
That's
go
right.
from a financial analyst to then flipping online websites? There's like a very conventional type of thing to this like kind of cowboy online entrepreneur kind of thing. How did that transition happen?
It just started because I just hated working for other people. My undergrad degree is in journalism. So I was doing a little freelance writing on the side while I was doing these cubicle jobs. And then I started learning about made for AdSense sites and things like that. So I was like, oh, that could be a way I could not be in a cubicle all day. So I started dabbling with that. And then that was back in 2008 when I lost my job as the financial analyst. And so I was like, well, I'm getting unemployment for a short period. This is a great time to go all in on this. And so I just started doing more freelance writing and creating those sites. And then before my unemployment was up, I'd made over $2,000 in a single week. And so I was like, I'm never going back. So that was just kind of how it started for me.
That's funny. I have a friend, Matt Giovanisi, who is he has a very similar story where
Yeah.
he was on unemployment. He has said before, like the government basically paid for me to build my website for a little bit there, and like to
Yeah.
start his business. So that's very funny. So you got started, and where did you like learn how to build websites? You said that you ended up making $2,000 a week
Mhm.
from that one website. That sounds great to many people listening. How did
Yeah.
you, I feel like we're skipping a little bit there. How did you end up
Yeah.
getting to that?
Well, like I said, I started back with when made for AdSense sites were big. So I'm like, a senior citizen in this industry. Basically, this was back when, the big people were like shoe money with those made for AdSense site checks that he was flashing on the internet. And so I started following him and people like him. Most of those people aren't even around anymore. And then back then, it was called pay per post. I think they're called IZEA now. So they did like basically sponsored posts on your sites if you had high page rank. And so I had a personal finance blog at the time that had a high page rank. And so that would kind of got me started into that. And then before too long, I met a guy who is actually out of the industry now as well, who was doing Amazon affiliate sites. And he was very open on his blog with how he did that. And so I kind of took a lot of what I do now from that's how I got started, which was what he was doing with buying guides and things like that. And then fast forward a little bit, and Squidoo was all the rage with internet marketers. And that kind of helped me refine my keyword research process and really kind of get my content so that it was short and tight and not just like fluff and stuff like that. And so that's kind of like the evolution of how I got into doing the sites that I do now.
Mm. For people that are listening that maybe, don't know about you or haven't read the article that I mentioned, which by the way, I'm going to have links to all of this in the show notes, but how many websites would you say have you built, flipped? Like how many of these, AdSense, Amazon affiliate websites have you run through in your career, so to say?
Since I've been doing this, for more than a decade, I'd say it has to be over 100. I
Wow.
went through one year where I sold like 30 to 40 sites just in a single year. They were mostly smaller sites, so it wasn't like I was, rolling in the cash or anything.
They weren't all $1 million sales.
Right. Yeah. 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 But usually right now I keep anywhere from 20 to 30 sites that are active in my portfolio. Those are kind of like different areas of, profitability. Some are brand new, some are, bringing in 5 figures a month, and then there's a lot in between.
Mm.
So,
And I'm so curious about why flip sites, right? Like, because for me, I know that you have two options, right? One is to keep the website and it's churning out some sort of monthly income.
mm-hmm.
But, and then when you flip it, you lose that monthly income, but you bring in a lump sum of cash, right?
Right.
But in the long term, wouldn't keeping that website earn more money if you kept it, right? Like that's why people are buying it. So where was your mentality around like, why flip it? Why not just, crank out 100 websites and have 100 websites in your portfolio?
Right. So in the beginning, it was more like of a cash flow issue where, you flip a site back then, it was like 20x, then you get all of that money up front, and then you have a lot more to invest in the next site. And so then you just kind of keep scaling it up, and then you can start bigger and bigger and bigger sites. And then after I got comfortable where I could just basically start any site that I wanted, what I did is I was chasing dollar signs. So I was starting sites like in the golf niche where I have zero interest. And so I would get bored pretty quickly, and I would not want to deal with golf content, for instance. And so I would flip that. Now, what I'm focusing on is how far can I take this site? So let's say that I was interested in golf. Would I be able to, say, monetize it with a course, ebooks, things like that? If I can't, then I sell it when I've taken it as far as I can. I do have some sites now that I'm building to keep for the long term where I can take it, courses, ebooks, maybe coaching or consulting, or maybe even turn it into like real world business with events and things like that. So those are the kind of sites I want to hold on to. But when I don't think I can take it, all the way, those are the ones I get rid of.
So I know a lot of people whose dream it is to be professional bloggers, right? Like that's their thing, is they're like, I want to have a blog and like write about this topic that I'm really passionate about and just kind of like live the blogger dream.
Right.
And as somebody who's worked with like a lot of people trying to start an online business, the first thing I tell them is don't be a blogger, because it's just so hard. And there's just, the battlefield is just littered with, like failed dreams, so to say. This sounds kind of dramatic, but I didn't know where else to go with that. And here you are saying that you've done this literally 100 times, right? Yeah. So what is it that these people that aren't making it are missing? Because at 100 websites, you must have some sort of system. There must be something that you've figured out that allows you to replicate that success. What do you think is like the number one thing that most people who enter this world with this blogger dream are missing, that you think that you've kind of like figured out?
I think a lot of people don't realize how long it can take to make that first dollar, and then how long it can take to scale it. So you have to go into it knowing, I might not make any money for 12 months. I might, depending on the niche, just say I was going into personal finance, it might be 2 years or longer before I start seeing real meaningful income. So it's really a game that's about incremental gains and showing up every day. So you have to be able to stay motivated to put in that time every day to keep building it so that when it does explode, you're actually still around for it.
And are you mostly like getting traffic for these websites? Is it just Google and it's just good old fashioned SEO, or is there something else to the mix?
It is primarily Google. Certain niches that I'm in do quite well on Pinterest. One of my biggest sites in terms of traffic right now gets about 18% of its traffic each month from Pinterest. And that site's bringing in about 70,000 a month for traffic.
Wow. Very nice. So how do you said that you went after the golf niche, you did personal finance, you're doing a bunch of these different niches. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to ask you specifics on like what niches you're working on, because I know that's a little taboo. But how do you decide that something is a good topic to write about?
Basically, what I like to see is the ability to monetize it more than one way. So like back when I was first starting with affiliate sites and flipping, I was 100% focused on Amazon affiliates, for my monetization. But these days I'm looking for, private affiliate programs, display ads. Does anybody have any ebooks where I can promote those as well? Things like that. So I want a niche that has several monetization opportunities, but it also can't be so narrow that I will run out of topics, because I like to build sites these days, with 200, 300, 400 posts before I flip it.
And do they start making, like, at what point do these websites start making money? Like you were saying 200, 300, 400 posts before you flip them. Do you just churn out those blog posts, or do you like spread them out over a particular amount of time?
What I typically do is each quarter I'll start anywhere from 2 to 5 new sites, and then I will hustle to get about 30 posts up on each new site that I start. And then I just kind of let it sit and kind of marinate in the SERPs and see which one of those pops. So then maybe the next quarter or 2 quarters after that, I'll go back to whichever one kind of takes off the most, and then just throw, a ton of content at that as fast as I can to get it up to, 100, 200, 300 posts. In terms of how long does it take, it really depends on what play you're focused at. So I have a case study site right now, my Project Tartarus site. It's my first site where I'm doing 100% informational content and trying to focus only on display ads from the station from the start, at least for the first year. And it took me like 3 months, I think, before it started making around $100 a month. That was on the age domain though. I can start affiliate sites and start on a fresh domain and make money the same time frame. So it really depends on what your monetization aim is. And also, of course, if you're using age domains, you can obviously shortcut that timeline.
And what you mean by all information posts is that otherwise on like something like an affiliate website,
Right.
you would be doing more like, hey, here are the 10, coffee mugs, the best 10 coffee mugs or something like that, that would then generate affiliate clicks, right?
Yeah. So I'm doing things like, how does decaf differ from regular? How much caffeine is in coffee? So it's all types of content like that for the informational play.
Gotcha.
So.
What sort of skills does somebody starting this, if somebody's listening to this and goes like, wow, this sounds like so much fun, like me, right? This to me is like, I've always had this dream of like just having like a portfolio of like small online businesses that kind of just do their own thing, right? What would you say are like the skills that somebody needs in order to get started?
I think being a good writer is very important unless you're planning on outsourcing. I find that often I can write something both better and faster than when I outsource. But other than that, I think good keyword research and being able to really analyze the sites that are ranking on the top 10 on page 1 and on-page SEO. I mean, these are things you can easily learn if you find the right blog posts or courses, that are for free out there. But if you just know that, that will get you ahead, probably more than even being a good writer.
Do you have any suggestions of, like you said, I think that that's like the key, or like good places to learn these things? Do you have any suggestions where people can go look if they do want a good source for this stuff?
I typically recommend the Ahrefs blog to people, as well as the Authority Hacker guys. There are obviously a lot of charlatans in this industry who basically are giving out bad information, but those two sites are usually pretty trustworthy.
Gotcha. All right, let's dive in here and talk a little bit about like the process, right? Like let's walk through, like, you get an idea for a website. Where do you start? And then what does the process of building one of these websites actually look like?
So if I've already got a niche picked out, then the next thing I'm doing is I want to come up with a list of 100 topics for 100 articles right from the start. So I'll just fill a spreadsheet with that. Usually I use Ahrefs. And then what I do is I just look for sites that are ranking in that niche that have a low domain rating in Ahrefs that are getting traffic. So that means that should be pretty easy for me to get traction immediately because they're doing it, and obviously being pretty low authority. And then, like I said, I like to write most of my content myself. If I'm like in a mad rush, we'll outsource it. Lately, I've been using Writer Access for that, and they're writers at 6 cents a word. I think that's level 4. So I hustle and I get as much content up as possible. And then, like I said, I just kind of let it sit. I don't like to let things sit for too long because my goal is to try to flip sites within 18 months initially. And I like to front load my expenses so that when I get a valuation for it, I'm getting, more money than I would if I was spending regularly throughout the 18 months.
One of the things that I'm noticing with how you're looking at this is like, we talked about people who get into blogging because they're passionate and they like want to be bloggers on a certain topic. You're almost like extremely analytical about this. Like there's no feelings. It's like, listen, I'm going to throw a bunch of these out there. And if they don't work, I'm going to cut them and I'm going to keep the one that is right. While somebody else is like, I have this website that's my baby. And like, I live and die by that website. Is there a way to make it, if you are passionate in that way, if your website is your baby, or do you think you need to be very analytical and very kind of like cold in your approach?
I think you could. I mean, there's plenty of people who have just one site and they're doing well with it. I think, though, it depends on what you're interested in. Obviously, if you are interested in video games, they have notoriously low RPMs for display ads, and they're also pretty low rate on Amazon. I actually had a gaming site I sold 3 years ago, and the ceiling is a lot lower for some niches like that than, say, if you were starting a site about swimming pools. You mentioned Matt, who I've read his Money Lab site. He has that swimming pool site that does amazing income. So, I mean, if you're really passionate about something that you can monetize well, you can definitely do really well with it.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing with Matt is that he has had that website for years. And he's like, you know why that website's so good is because I know everything about pools.
Yeah.
Like he's
Yeah.
like, I like in my sleep can tell you what's wrong with a pool because like, he was literally been doing that as a teenager,
Yeah.
So when you say that you flip these websites, I'm curious, like what kind of, traffic are these websites getting at the point that you flip them? And like, what can somebody expect at that stage? Like you said, you kind of hold on to them for a year and a half before you flip them. What sort of like monetary amounts are we talking about when you flip these? Are they like hundreds of thousands of dollars, or do these flips tend to be, in the 10, 20, like how much do you normally flip a website for?
In terms of traffic to the sites, I actually couldn't tell you the traffic to any of the sites I sold because I only focused on the monthly income. So I don't know if I'm an anomaly with that or not. In the past, what I would usually shoot for was anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 a month as my target income, and that's when I would flip it. I like to flip in the under 300,000 price range because they move really quickly when you're selling a site like that, especially if it's under 100,000 for the sales price. And you don't have to worry about people wanting to finance part of it. And I can't remember what EmpireFlippers calls it, but where you only get part of the money up front and then they pay you over time. I've actually known people who've done that, and then the site fails and they don't end up getting the rest of their money. So that's why I like to say in that kind of smaller field. When I first started out, it was getting around a 20x multiple of the last, I believe, 12 months. And the last sites I sold were in 2019. And I believe they both got a 35x for the.
So it's 35 times the monthly profit, correct?
Right. Like sometimes you'll get a valuation based on your average of your last 12 months. Sometimes it'll be 3 months, sometimes 12 months. It just really depends on, like, I do a lot of stuff in seasonal niches. Like I used to be in the paddleboard niche for years. And so that would be a 12-month valuation because obviously people aren't paddleboarding in the winter months. So.
And you said that you do most of your writing, which to me is shocking because I was expecting you to say I have a team of writers. How do you manage to write so much content for so many websites?
Well, I think it's because I used to be a freelance writer and my bachelor's degree is in journalism. So, I'm pretty fast typing and I'm obviously pretty used to doing research. And so I do it pretty quickly. So I think that's why I just do it myself, and that I prefer to do it that way because it doesn't take me that long.
Gotcha. Yeah. Going back to what you were saying about the websites moving quickly if they're under 100,000, I also feel like when websites get bigger, you're probably selling to a smaller pool of buyers, right? Because it takes a certain buyer to be able to look at that website and say, like, you know what, I can take it from 300-400 to 1 million, right? While somebody seeing it at 60 is like, I can take this from 60 to 200 and like flip it again.
Well, and based on people I've talked to who have sold more in the higher brackets, there seems to be kind of like a dead space between around maybe 350,000 to about 700,000, because you have the institutional buyers who are all buying in at the 700K plus. And so there's like not really anyone left in the middle there. So I feel like anybody who's starting out either needs to shoot for under 300,000 or over 700,000 for their sales price for it to move the fastest.
I love that. It's so interesting. I'm curious, what is like your end goal with the business? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you see yourself doing this for like as long as you can, or is there some sort of like goal that you're going after with the website flipping?
I do actually really enjoy doing SEO and doing this. It's kind of like a nerd puzzle, I guess, for me, but it's not something that, I don't want to be, sitting in a retirement home doing building sites and stuff. What I would like to do is transition some things into real world businesses, because I do have some sites that I've started that have that potential. So that's probably what I'll do, is some type of hybrid type thing where I only have a few sites and they also have real world businesses that are associated with them.
What do you mean by a real world business?
Well, so back when I had the gaming site that I sold, I had planned out how it was feasible to do like niche board game type conventions. And you could have the brand of the website be the brand of the convention, kind of like as a sponsor. And then you could, you could make, branded little bags to put your dice in and things like that. So that would turn it more into a real world business while it would still have the website with the display ads and the affiliate component.
So essentially, like you would build some sort of like product and then use just the traffic and the attention from the website to essentially sell that product.
Right. Or let's say, like we talked about the coffee niche a minute ago. So you wanted to do like a subscription box that you could turn that into a thing like that. Or maybe you wanted to open a cafe, but still have it be going all the way back to the site that you started that was a really good brand. I'm really big on picking very brandable domains for the website so that you do have that potential.
Do you have I mean, I'm a hobbyist when it comes down to domain names, and I own way too many to be comfortable with. So I'm wondering, how many domain names are you owning at any one point, just as you come up with ideas for things?
Well, I will tell you, I bought 3 yesterday. So I was just in my name silo account, and there's 303 in there, which was, that's why I remember, because it was 303. But yeah,
wow.
I also have a Namecheap account, and I don't know how many are in there, but there's some.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's like one of those things that for me, it's like scratching the itch. Like I only have so much time in the day, but there's so many things that I want to do that in some way, buying that domain almost like scratches the itch of like, all right, I can't do this because I don't have the time or the focus to do it, but like at least I'm going to buy the domain.
Right. And then 6 years later, you're still renewing it and there's no site. Yeah. That's me.
Right. Yeah. Do you have any sort of like niches that somebody who's a beginner who's listening to this and saying like, hey, this sounds pretty cool. What sort of niches would you point them towards? And what sort of niches would you tell them to like stay away from?
I would say definitely stay away from personal finance as a beginner, just because it's so competitive. Other things I would stay away from as a beginner are like VPNs, hosting, CBD. They all have big high payout and everyone's going after them. So, actually the sleep niche is actually kind of crazy competitive with negative SEO. I'd stay away from that as well.
What do you mean by negative SEO?
Like people sending you junk links, casino links, pharma links, those types of things, trying to take your site down.
Gotcha.
In terms of good ones, I would say anything related to like parenting, home, food / cooking. Those are all things that do really well with display ads. And you can also sell a lot of affiliate products. And then like say with cooking, you could even do recipe books, things like that, where you can branch out. But those are all really pretty easy to get started in. And there is competition, but you can kind of niche down. So like, I don't know, maybe you want to focus on air fryers and cooking with air fryers in the kitchen niche or something.
Is there such a thing as like too niche? Like you just said air fryers. Like, is that too far? Like an air fryer HQ blog? Like, is that too far? Or is there such a thing as too far in terms of niching down?
I think if you were starting something like hikingsandals.com, that would be a little too far, but you could do hiking and that would not be too niched. But I think you could also do air fryer niche down. I've seen plenty of successful sites like that. So I guess it would really just depend. I mean, you could do just mountain biking. I mean, so
yeah, I don't know what it is about air frying, I guess, that gets people so jazzed up. I mean, like we have an air fryer and we get together with our friends, and like my wife is always like, guess what I air fried the other day? And I'm like, why? Like, how did this become a thing? I'm so
it's
curious.
Like the Instant Pot, right? Like people are crazy about it.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's see here. One of the things that I've been hearing since I got started was the death of blogging and the death of blogs. And I feel like I've been hearing about this since I got started in like 2016 or so, and I'm still hearing it today. Do you think that this is something that is here to stay? Do you think that this is an industry that people can safely sort of like invest time in? And the reason why I'm asking this is like, at one point, Amazon affiliate websites were all the rage, right? Because it was such a good way to make money. It was relatively easy. And then Amazon came in and essentially just shot everybody in the foot at the beginning of 2020, right? So where do you see this industry going? And do you think that there's still room for people to sort of dive in and become experts on this field the way that you have?
Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think the key is that if you're getting into it is adaptability, because it does change all the time. And sometimes it changes more than once a year. Like I said, when I got started, everyone was doing made for AdSense sites. And then everyone was doing Amazon affiliate sites. And now Amazon has cut the commission several times. So you have some people saying, oh, I'm never doing Amazon again. And so now display ads are really big. So you just have to be able to adapt and just move with the industry. But yeah, I think you
Gotcha.
could start today and do just as well as I've done.
And you said that it usually takes like what, like a year and a half to flip that website.
Right. Yeah. I used to be able to do it in just 12 months, but now around 18 months is the earliest I can flip.
How come? What changed?
Um, it's just taking longer to rank because there's more competition, things like that, basically. And for me personally, I'm just trying to now flip things at a slightly higher monthly income. So
Let's talk about selling the websites, right?
okay.
This is the sexy part of it. I
Yeah,
feel like
right.
building the
Yeah.
websites and sort of like just pushing through all of these blog posts and whatnot is sort of like the nitty gritty stuff. But the
Mhm.
sexy thing is to sell the website and make a bunch of cash on the other end.
Right.
So how do you go through, like, what does the process of selling a website look like?
Well, basically you just figure out, you can just like look at Empire Flippers current listings to see kind of what multiple that they're giving people right now. So you can kind of do some back of the napkin math for yourself so that you can kind of see, oh, is now a good time for me or should I wait? Kind of things like that. Empire Flippers also has a calculator somewhere on their site where you can input information about your site to get a valuation. And then once you're ready, you either contact them or another broker. I've used a few places, and Empire Flippers is my favorite, and I do recommend it. You submit your information, and I think that the business analyst, I think, is who takes over all of your data. They want to know about your expenses, how much you spend on hosting, things like that. You give them screenshots of all of your income. And they go through your backlink profile with like a really fine tooth comb. So I know that there have been people who've tried to hide, shady links and stuff like that, and you can't do that because they'll catch it. So then after they do all of that, they come back to you and say, please check all of this data, because they build you like a P&L, and then they say, here's what we can give you if we list it, here's what we think it'll go for, and let us know if you're okay to list it. And in my experience, it usually goes live the next week. And then as soon as it goes live, you're going to get hit with all kinds of emails from interested buyers who have questions. So those do go through Empire Flippers, but then you just have to respond kind of like in a customer service ticket. And usually there's some negotiation because people kind of, Empire Flippers has a really high multiple, so they want to pay a little less. So you go back and forth with people on that. And then once you agree to sell to someone, Empire Flippers gives everyone who was interested 24 hours to counter the offer. I think they have to offer 10% more, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
So essentially, like if you were selling a website and I put in an offer on it, Empire Flippers will send out some sort of like an alert to everyone else that was interested, like, hey, there's an offer, but you can counter it.
Right. And they'll tell them you have
That's
24
a
hours to beat
a
it. Yeah.
smart little way to get some more money for that website. Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't like that when I first sold with them in 2014. So it's something they've added in recent years. It's really nice. And so then once you finally get an offer that the final buyer that you agreed on, they have a whole migrations team who basically moves over everything, which is really, really nice. And then they give the buyer, I think, 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, I can't remember, to kind of look over everything and make sure traffic is still what it's supposed to be, income is looking like they expect, and things like that. And then that's it. They ask you how you want your money paid out, and then you either get like a wire transfer or Bitcoin or whatever you want, and then you celebrate. So yeah.
What's your favorite way to celebrate? Like, do you have I'm thinking about The Office. I don't know if you've seen The Office, but there's that one episode in which Jim basically has this one client that's like 25% of his like income every year or something. He has this little bottle of champagne that he hides in his like drawer. Do you have something similar, or like how do you celebrate when you sell a site?
It's different every time. One year I went to Maui, so I mean it just varies. Yeah.
And why do you find, I mean, I'm a fan of Empire Flippers. They've been on the podcast before, but why do you find that they are the best broker out there? Like, what about them do you think stands above the rest? For anybody who's listening is like,
Right.
I want to explore all the other options. Like what about Empire Flippers like kind of, like why were you attracted to
Right.
them and why were they above the rest?
Well, all of the brokers have a similar structure in terms of the commission that they take for selling your site. But I feel like Empire Flippers is the only one who actually tries to even earn that money for that they're getting. They give you a lot of support from, like I said, the person who vets your site to the person who migrates it. I've had a few instances where I've done calls with interested buyers through them, and they really hold your hand through that entire process. Like they will get with you before the call with the potential buyer to kind of coach you on it and tell you what to expect. And then once that call ends, they stay on with just you to kind of let you know how they thought it would go, to see if you have any questions and kind of let you know what should come next. And that's not something that I've experienced with other brokers. And I have had calls with buyers through other brokers. So overall, it's just it feels like they're working actually for both sides and not just for themselves. So.
Mm-hmm. So that article that you wrote for them, again, the name of it was 7 Tips for Building and Flipping Sites from a 6-Figure Team of One. And I want to very quickly focus on that last bit, the 6-figure team of one, because immediately I'm wondering, what does an average day look like for that 6-figure team of one? Like, what is how does a day go by for you in terms of like, running the business and that kind of stuff?
So the first thing I do when I get up is I make sure that all of my sites are up and I'm not having any hosting issues and that everything's like it's running smoothly. And then from there, it really varies. Sometimes I have a list of keywords for a site where I know I want to start writing content immediately. So that's what I'll start on. For sites that I use Pinterest on, I just do that as soon as I post the new content so that I don't have to kind of wait to do that. What I try to do is work on one site a day to kind of stay focused, unless there's like some fires I have to put out with like, hosting going down or something like that. And then I would say, honestly, at this point, I maybe average 5 hours a day of work Monday through Friday, if that. But that's obviously not true when I was starting out. I did put in a lot of, 14, 16-hour days. So I don't want people to think they can just jump in and work 5 hours. But yeah, I'm basically just writing content, looking for keywords, and that's pretty much it. Nothing really exciting.
A lot of people who are listening to this podcast are probably familiar with the 4-hour work week, right? Which kind of inspired all of this. Do you feel like if you wanted to, you could live the 4-hour work week right now with your business model?
Probably. What I like to do is just randomly take a month or two off and do nothing. So when I moved from the Netherlands back to the US in January, I took 2 months off and didn't work on anything. I did obviously keep track of whether my hosting went down, but that was really it. I did nothing. And like I usually take off all of December and part of January. So instead of trying to do a 4-hour work week, I just basically only work a few months out of the year.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's something that Tim Ferriss talks about in the book as well, is where he talks about like doing sprints, right? Like, hey, like these couple of months, I'm like head down, doing a lot of business, getting a lot of work done. And then like, I might take all of August off because I'm going to go do whatever. So, and I think that's really appealing to a lot of people, like the whole, like not necessarily deferring retirement for when you're 65 and kind of like, dropping a little bit of that retirement throughout life. What sort of tools or courses would you recommend to somebody who's listening to this and going like, all right, take my money, I want to learn how to do this. Like, this sounds awesome. Like, where can they go and start learning and start essentially building this sort of business?
I told you before we started that I actually create and sell courses, but when people start out, I always tell them save your money, because you can save that for content or links or whatever and try to learn it on your own for free. Like I said, the Ahrefs blog is a good source. So is Authority Hacker. They've actually put a lot of great stuff. I also recommend Doug Cunnington's YouTube channel, which is Niche Site Project. I've seen a few of the things also that Income School puts out. They have some good tips as well. And Morton at, I think it's Passive Income Geek on YouTube. They also put out some great content over there. Those are the places that I would start to learn how to do this so that you're not spending money that you could later put into your site.
So you said, spend money to buy links, I'm assuming for backlinks and that kind of stuff. How much money would you say it takes to build a website, like how much money do you need to invest in a website in order to build it to something, sustainable and something that's earning you a monthly income?
I would say $5,000 is a good starting point for most people. The case study site that I'm doing for Project Tartarus, it started out on an expired domain that I spent $2,000 for. I've outsourced a large amount of that content just to kind of show people what they can accomplish with outsourcing instead of writing your own content. And I believe I am up to $14,200 so far, and the site has 250 posts on it. So
$14,000 spent on it, or $14,000
yes,
okay.
spent on it, and it's bringing in $400 a month right now just from Ezoic.
So essentially, if you were to flip this website right now, it would earn you 12 grand. Is my math correct on that?
Yeah, 30x
Like if we're
would
looking
probably
at
be a good
30x
starting point. Yeah.
Gotcha. So then from here on, essentially it's profit.
Right. If I were to stop putting content on, yes.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Well, Shawna, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been super fun. Like I said, this is for me. I'm like, oh, this sounds so cool. That sounds so awesome. Let people know. I know that you said that you've been putting out courses every single month this year,
Yes.
which sounds amazing. Clearly, you are the most productive person in the history of the world because you're putting out all of this blog posts and you're creating new courses every month. Where can people find those courses if they're interested?
Yeah, the courses are at digitalauthorityacademy.com, or you can find the link on my blog, skipblast.com.
Perfect. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you and be like, hey, Shawna, love what you're doing, where can they find you? Are you on social media at all, or?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, or anyone can just email me through my site, through Skip Blast.
Awesome. Well, Shawna, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute blast talking to you, and best of luck with everything. I'm super excited to see everything that you're doing.
Cool. Thanks. It was a lot of fun.